Good morning. Chapter 13 of the Ribhu Gita. All is unreal, all is consciousness. Verse 1. Listen attentively, I shall give you an explanation. Rare in the Vedas, scriptures, the Agamas, in other subtle treatises and elsewhere. Whatever difference is seen, apart from Brahman, is ever unreal. The only reality that is changeless and transcends all is Brahman alone. Whatever, verse 2, whatever way a thing is known, it is unreal indeed. Whatever way a thing is thought of, it is unreal indeed. Whatever way a thing is seen, it is unreal indeed. Whatever way a thing is heard of, it is unreal indeed. Whatever way a thing is inquired into, it is unreal indeed. Whatever way a thing is spoken of, it is unreal indeed. Whatever way a thing is experienced, it is unreal indeed. The one thing that exists ever is the Supreme Brahman alone. 3. Shrines of whatever kind they be, are only unreal. Holy waters of whatever kind they be, are only unreal. Gods, whoever they be, are only unreal. Surface of whatever kind it may be is only unreal. Austerities or intense aspiration of whatever kind are only unreal. Japa, the repetition of mantras, whatever they are unreal. All that is seen of whatever kind is only unreal. The one thing that exists ever is the Supreme Brahman alone. 4. Senses, whatever they be, are only unreal. Sense organs, whatever they be, are only unreal. The experiencer, whoever he be, is only unreal. The experience, whatever it be, is only unreal. Egoity, of whatever kind, is only unreal. Desires of whatever kind are only unreal. Differences of whatever kind are only unreal. The one thing that exists ever is the Supreme Brahman alone. 5. The wondrous Maya is only unreal. Its extensive consequences are only unreal. The persistent ego is only unreal. Its trail of consequences is only unreal. The effects of intelligence are only unreal. The activities of the mind are only unreal. The activities of thought are only unreal. And what endures unaffected is ever Brahman alone. 6. The gross body, which has an origin, is only unreal. The fickle state of wakefulness is only unreal. The subtle body, prone to differentiation, is only unreal. The dream that is seen as a part is only unreal. The blemished causal body is only unreal. The state of deep sleep without a second is only unreal. All differences that impinge on us are only unreal. What is imperishable ever is Brahman alone. 7. The waking state and the dream state are only unreal. The deep sleep state not subject to any uncertainties, is only unreal. The auspicious fourth state is only unreal. The experiencer of all these is only unreal. The aggregate of the mixed is only unreal. All differences not being based on truth are only unreal. What exists permanently ever is Brahman alone. 8. What appears as oneself is only unreal. What appears as one's own is only unreal. What appears as you and I is only unreal. What appears as all is only unreal. What appears as the king is only unreal. What appears as the guru is only unreal. All variety of appearances are also unreal. What is indestructible ever is Brahman alone. 9. What appears as the doer is only unreal. What appears as the action is only unreal. What appears as real is only unreal. What appears as both real and unreal is only unreal. What appears as the seed is only unreal. What appears in various ways is only unreal. Whatever appears in whichever way is only unreal. What exists ever is the supreme Brahman alone. 10. What appears as the good is only unreal. What appears as not good is only unreal. What appears as the spoken is only unreal. What appears as the unspoken is also only unreal. What appears as the non-existent is only unreal. What appears as the existent is only unreal. All appearances are only unreal. What is full ever is Brahman alone. 11. The Vedas and scriptures are only unreal. Treatises of various kinds are only unreal. All qualities, as also faults, are only unreal. All desires and desirelessness are only unreal. The elements and what is composed of the elements are only unreal. Merit and demerit are all only unreal. All things that become differentiated are only unreal. What is ever differenceless is Brahman alone. 12. All things here are only unreal. All that are not here are only unreal. All things that are there are only unreal. All that are not there are only unreal. All things, wherever they are only unreal. All things of whatever kind are only unreal. Whatever has concepts, fixed ideas, is only unreal. What is changeless ever is Brahman alone. 13. All things that diminish are only unreal. All things that never diminish are only unreal. All things that are hidden are only unreal. All things that never disappear are only unreal. All things that are sentient are only unreal. All things that are insentient are only unreal. All things that grow up are only unreal. What is unaffected ever is Brahman alone. All the variety of worlds, 14. All the variety of worlds is only unreal. The gods and demons are only unreal. The four castes are only unreal. The mixed castes are only unreal. The wonderful orders of life are only unreal. All activities occurring in them are only unreal. All the fruits thereof are only unreal. What is steady ever is Brahman alone. 15. The black unguent of ignorance is only unreal. The pentad of elements is only unreal. The pentad of gods is only unreal. The pentad of sheaths is only unreal. All the beings in ignorance are only unreal. All the various conditionings are only unreal. All that appears unsteady is only unreal. What is changeless ever is Brahman alone. 16. The sextet of anxieties is only unreal. The sextet of changes is only unreal. The sextet of enemies is only unreal. All binding attachments are only unreal. All times that progress are only unreal. All countries and things are only unreal. Whatever is seen in ignorance is only unreal. What remains immutable ever is Brahman alone. 17. What is said and what is unsaid are only unreal. What is free ever is Brahman alone. Whatever is seen as differentiated is only unreal. What is differenceless ever is Brahman alone. Whoever hears this explanation attentively and understands it as told will become the Supreme. Hear further what leads directly to realization. 18. All things are Brahman, which is existence bliss. All people are Brahman, which is existence bliss. I am Brahman, which is consciousness bliss. You are Brahman, which is consciousness bliss. Nidaga, hence have this constant certitude, without a speck of doubt, that all ever is Brahman, and that eternal Brahman is myself. 19. I'm ever only of the nature of consciousness. I'm only of the nature of changeless consciousness. I'm only of the nature of bliss alone, without bondage. I'm only of the nature of the pure, non-dual absolute. I'm only of the nature of the immaculate and the bondageless. I'm only of the nature of utter peace. I'm only of the nature of the limitless Supreme Brahman. Have this certitude ever. 20. I'm only of the nature of a mass of existence, consciousness, bliss. I'm only of the nature that is unassociated with the cycle of birth and death, samsara. I'm only of the nature of the pure and attributeless. I'm only of the nature of the untainted and partless. I am of the nature of the immaculate fullness. I'm only of the nature of the self-luminous. I'm only of the nature of the non-dual Supreme Brahman. Have this certitude ever. 21. I'm only of the nature of consciousness alone, which is all. I'm only of the nature of the changeless consciousness alone. I'm only of the nature of the spotless consciousness alone. I'm only of the nature of the non-dual consciousness alone. I'm only of the nature of the peerless consciousness alone. I'm only of the nature of the partless consciousness alone. Become yourself ever consciousness alone. By this certitude in yourself, become yourself ever consciousness alone. By this certitude in yourself. 22. The expansive worlds are only consciousness. The variety of beings are only consciousness. The Lord Ishvara is also only consciousness. The pentad of deities such as Brahma and others is also only consciousness. The actions of these differentiated gods are also only consciousness. All further differences are all only consciousness. The bondage due to delusion is also only consciousness. Delusionless liberation is also only consciousness. 23. All the activities of the mind are only consciousness. All things done by thought are also only consciousness. The purifying listening, shravana, is only consciousness. The subtle reflection, manana, is also only consciousness. Continuous profound contemplation is also only consciousness. Pure samadhi, intense absorption, is also only consciousness. Non-dual awareness also is only consciousness. The experience of bliss is also only consciousness. 24. Being established as one's natural self is only consciousness. Being established everywhere also is only consciousness. Being established in power is only consciousness. Being established in space is only consciousness. Being established unmixed with anything is also only consciousness. Being established as the truth is only consciousness. Being established as motionless is only consciousness. Being established as undivided is also only consciousness. 25. The ignorance that makes things seem apart is only consciousness. Pure knowledge is also only consciousness. Concepts and fixed ideas, the will that intensely binds is also only consciousness. All the world that is inquired into is only consciousness. You who inquire are also only consciousness. I who answer am also only consciousness. Various items discoursed upon are also only consciousness. The supreme, the individuals, and the world are all only consciousness. 26. The elephant-headed god Ganesha and the six-headed god Skanda are also only consciousness. The Divine Mother and gracious Shiva are also only consciousness. All the retinue of Shiva is also only consciousness. The loving devotees of Shiva are also only consciousness. All the worthy sages are also only consciousness. All shining gods are also only consciousness. That defectless one is only consciousness without attributes. The best, the attributeless, is also only consciousness. 27. The worship of the Supreme Shiva is also only consciousness. The worship of Hari as practiced is also only consciousness. The worship of Brahma that is resorted to is also only consciousness. The worship of all others is also only consciousness. The full-fledged worship of Uma is also only consciousness. The worship of Lakshmi and others is also only consciousness. The worship of all the gods also is only consciousness. All ever is only consciousness. 28. All elements like space and others also are only consciousness. All nature is also only consciousness. The sun and others of the triad of lights are only consciousness. The vast expanse of stars is also only consciousness. The defectless clouds are also only consciousness. The passage of the year is also only consciousness. All changes in the sky are only consciousness. All changes in the universe are only consciousness. 29. All life from microbes onwards are only consciousness. Mountains, rivers, and forests are only consciousness. All the expanding cities are only consciousness. All wonderful activities are only consciousness. Variegated power is only consciousness. The crores of universes are only consciousness. All things moving and unmoving are only consciousness. All ever is only consciousness. 30. Husband, son, and wife are only consciousness. Father and mother are only consciousness. All the special relatives are only consciousness. Outsiders and enemies are only consciousness. The disciple who follows the instruction is only consciousness. The Guru who bestows the instruction is only consciousness. All beings in different states are only consciousness. All that is seen is only consciousness. 31. The cause and the result are only consciousness. The eyes, ears, and others are only consciousness. The power to kill and its culmination are only consciousness. The undivided supreme certitude is only consciousness. The goal that is reached is only consciousness. Shiva, who enables one to reach the goal, is only consciousness. The earth and others are all only consciousness. All the sentient and insentient are only consciousness. 32. What is seen as wondrous is only consciousness. What is seen as different and apart is only consciousness. What appears as that is only consciousness. What appears as oneself is only consciousness. What appears as the word consciousness is only consciousness. What appears to be not consciousness is also only consciousness. All that is seen as imaginary is only consciousness. All the appearances that are seen are only consciousness. 33. 33. All conditionings like Maya, delusion, are only consciousness. The supreme and the individuals, the jivas, are all only consciousness. All the various delusory worlds are only consciousness. All the differences therein are only consciousness. The pure Shiva nature is only consciousness. The non-dual supreme nature is only consciousness. One's own loving nature is only consciousness. Or is only the perfectly full consciousness. 34. Death and birth are only consciousness. Wallowing in uncertainty is also only consciousness. Going and coming are only consciousness. Merit, punya, and demerit, papa, are only consciousness. Creation and dissolution are only consciousness. What is understood as a thing apart is only consciousness. Being desireless is only consciousness. Understanding all as one whole is only consciousness. 35. The means that appear different are only consciousness. The contemplation as consciousness is only consciousness. The delusionless knowledge of the Supreme is only consciousness. The worship based upon ripe knowledge is only consciousness. The sorrowless state of happiness is only consciousness. Complete silence is only that consciousness. Remaining as the One is only consciousness. Remaining actionless is only consciousness. 36. Various rare mantras are only consciousness. The endless modes of Tantra, the rituals, mystical practices are only consciousness. Worship and action are only consciousness. Simple devotion is only that consciousness. The heart space also, only that consciousness. All thoughts about these are only consciousness. The insignificant blade of grass and others are only consciousness. All appearances that are seen are only consciousness. 37. The body, life, senses, and organs are only consciousness. The deluded mind and intellect are only that consciousness. Ego itself is only that consciousness. The wavering thought is only that consciousness. Delusion and the three bodies are only consciousness. The experience of three is only that consciousness. The sorrowless fourth state is only consciousness. The summary of all that has been said is only consciousness. 38. The state of bondage is only that consciousness. The fourth state is only that consciousness. The pentat of sheaths is only that consciousness. The experience of these is only that consciousness. All ever is only that consciousness. Samasti, cosmic collective, and Vyasti, distinct, separated, are only that consciousness. Any kind of appearance is only that consciousness. The Lord Ishvara, the world and beings are only consciousness. 39. Consciousness itself of the nature of existence alone. Consciousness itself of the nature of consciousness alone. Consciousness itself of the nature of bliss alone. Consciousness itself of the nature of indivisible one alone. Consciousness itself of the nature of supreme Brahman. Consciousness itself of the nature of supreme Shiva. Consciousness itself of the nature of the Immaculate. Consciousness itself of the nature of the Supreme Self. 40. Consciousness itself is also the ever auspicious. Consciousness itself is also the ever taintless. Consciousness itself is also the partless and attributeless. Consciousness itself is also the ever unafflicted. Consciousness itself is the ever sheathless. Consciousness itself is unsurpassed bliss. Consciousness itself is the spotless, the actionless. Consciousness itself is the all-pervasive. 41. Consciousness itself is the infinite peace. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the supreme abode. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the highest. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the highest, of the higher than the highest. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the supreme knowledge. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the supreme attainment. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the supreme existence. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the completely full. 42. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the pure. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the supreme truth. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the pure space of consciousness. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the self-luminous. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the changeless. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the markless. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the transcendental supreme. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the undivided supreme. 43. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the equality of all. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the self of all. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the connectionless. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the unbroken. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the omnipresent. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the one-self. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the Supreme God. Consciousness itself is of the nature of the Supreme Brahman. 44. Consciousness indeed is the real nature of Brahma, the Creator. Consciousness indeed is the real nature of Hari, the Sustainer. Consciousness indeed is the real nature of Hara, the Destroyer. Consciousness indeed is the real nature of the gods. Consciousness indeed is the real nature of men. Consciousness indeed is our real nature. Consciousness indeed is your real nature. Consciousness indeed is the real nature of all. 45. Whatever appearances arise on whichever substratum, all those superimpositions are only that substratum. The silver seen as a superimposition on nacre, we have seen, is only nacre. Likewise the Lord Ishvara, the world and beings, appearing on Brahman, are only Brahman. There is not an atom apart from consciousness. All is consciousness. I say this in the name of Shiva, consciousness alone. 46. Hence you are consciousness. I am consciousness. All the world, beings, and the Lord are consciousness. Having this certitude, as taught by me, in your mind, quite steadfastly, by this undivided certitude you will attain the undivided knowledge of the Supreme Brahman, O great sage, and overcoming quickly the sorrow of recurrent birth and death, attain the great bliss of liberation. 47. Indeed you are consciousness. Indeed I am consciousness. Indeed all is consciousness. There's not an atom apart from consciousness. All is consciousness. There's not an atom of such as this body and others. There's not an atom of such as this country or others. Indeed all bodies and others are consciousness. Indeed all countries and others are consciousness. I say this in the name of Shiva, who fulfills the desire of his devotees. There's no doubt about what has been said. This is the supreme truth. 48. I'm consciousness alone. I'm consciousness alone. All is consciousness. I'm consciousness alone. I'm consciousness alone. All is consciousness. I'm existence alone. I'm existence alone. All is existence. I'm existence alone. I'm existence alone. All is existence. I am that Brahman alone. I am that alone. I indeed am all. I am that alone. I am that alone. I indeed am all. Nidaga. In this way, blemishlessly, unremittingly, ever be of this certitude. 49. As expounded by the Supreme Shiva in His grace, for the removal of all the sorrowful cycle of birth, aging, and death, of all beings who are subject to origin and dissolution, I've explained this matter, rare to come by in all the Vedas and other scriptures. Whoever listens to this exposition even once and understands it properly becomes Brahman. 50. All beings who experience birth, aging, and death will, by turning to consciousness, who has no birth or such, and reflecting and contemplating upon this, overcome the great delusion, and being fearless, with the knots of their minds cut asunder, by the undivided supreme knowledge without a second, become the non-dual supreme Shiva. Thus the sage Ribhu expounded the rare meaning of the supreme to Nidaga. 51. It is the perfectly full form of our Lord in the state of joyous dance that is the substance of all the Vedic knowledge expounded here in various ways, with the certitude that all the world, the individuals, jivas, and the supreme para are unreal. All is ever consciousness. The complete, perfectly full consciousness is yourself. The infinite consciousness is myself. So have a great day, everybody. This was the last beautiful verse. Bye for now.